Deltarune is a game filled with narrative parallels and foreshadowing. I mean, it is made by Toby Fox after all. And one of the most obvious examples is the fight against Spamton Neo. I don't think I necessarily have to explain why a battle against someone obsessed with freedom and attached to puppet strings that make him fall to the ground in a lifeless fashion when gone is important in a game where you, the player, control the body of the protagonist who, contrary to normal most games, is a separate entity from you and clearly objects to many of your decisions you force him to make is, well, important. But I think there are more parallels to other important parts of this game's story from this fight that have gone mostly unnoticed. That being his ultimate goal in this moment, to take your soul and reach what he deems heaven. This sticks out to me because Spamton is one of very few characters to even acknowledge the soul, and the only one to actively try and take it, which is strange considering the soul being so important to the story of the game. I mean, it is us, the player, the reason this game is a game. And the fact he not only shows that he knows about it, but tries to take it for his own goals is interesting, because it sets up the concept of people after the soul, or at least a soul, as important. And it bothers me that it hasn't gone anywhere, at least yet. The game isn't fully finished. This is why this exchange came to my mind again after replaying Undertale. In Waterfall, there are signs explaining that the reason the war between monsters and humans started was because of the humans being scared of monsters' ability to absorb human souls and become a being of unfathomable power. Facts as to both the determination of humans and the magic of monsters. This process can also technically happen in reverse, but only with a soul from a boss monster. A specific type of monster whose stronger soul persists after its death, similar to that of a human, even if for not very long. In fact, this is initially presented as the only way to get past the barrier due to it requiring both a human and monster soul to pass. This concept is something that immediately stuck out to me. Not necessarily the souls being from humans to monsters, as the differences between the species seemingly have been significantly decreased from what it was in Undertale, but rather from the idea that this could be applied to Lightners and Darkners. And isn't just mere speculation due to this being the goal of Spamton Neo. And Spamton seems to want to reach somewhere he thinks of as heaven, which from the perspective of a Darkner, an object given life by the Dark Fountain, would almost definitely be the place the person who made said object and the one who made the fountain that gave him life came from, the Light World. Which thematically lines up with Undertale having it that you have to have at least one of both types of soul to pass through the barrier. If you take this further, we can come to a conclusion. Given the fact that the Dark Fountains are made from determination, which, while not guaranteed to work the same as in Undertale, is definitely the same in its origin, its definition, the will to live. I think it's safe to assume that the Darkners don't possess a concrete soul of their own, and only borrow determination from the fountain. Which is why, when removed from the world it made, they are no longer alive, but instead the inanimate object they started as. Meaning that if a Darkner were to take a Lightner soul and then enter the Light World, they would no longer revert into an object. I don't think this is in theory either. I believe we have seen one of these firsthand. The Roaring Knight. The Roaring Knight, seemingly the main antagonist of Deltarune, although not technically confirmed yet, and knowing Toby, I wouldn't be surprised if there is another. The Knight is strange. It seems like a Darkner, given its physical similarities to the Titans and Eram, or at least I'm hoping this thing's called Eram. I don't want to call it the Shadow Mantle Holder for the rest of my life. But it's also able to enter the Light World, implying whatever it is to be from the Light World. Susie even comments on that. But no normal Lightner should be able to carry Undyne all the way to the shelter. In the Dark World, sure, this thing is clearly extremely powerful, but if it's a normal Lightner like us, then shouldn't it revert back into a normal person in the Light World? And I doubt whoever that is would be able to so easily kidnap the person who can literally lift an entire car with one hand. Okay, I just checked and I was wrong. It's not one hand, it's both hands, but I don't care how many hands you're using, that's still impressive. Not to mention, we look really similar to our light world counterpart, just fantasy world outfits in different colors, as opposed to the night, which I can't really think of anyone in hometown who would look like this giant beast in the dark world. I mean, yes, obvious antlers aside, we've already seen a holiday in a dark world, and she didn't have anything unique about her transformation. And I don't think a normal person would be able to shapeshift like the night can, regardless of world. Of course, not that it can't be a holiday, I mean, the antlers kind of give that away. But there's no way that it's just a holiday. No amount of bad parenting or deadly illness is gonna do this to you. But there is one we haven't mentioned. Deltarune Fairy Video thinks December holiday is the night. In other news, grass is green and the sky is blue. But I think you already get what I'm getting at here, right? I won't go over all the evidence for this being the night, because I assume if you're watching this, you already know it. Other than the lyrics in Big Shot, it pulls the strings and makes them rain 100% referring to a guitar. Why is there only like one video that mentions this? But a big hole in the theory has always been the how. As in still, how can they do whatever this is? I thought Tess was a reindeer monster. I didn't think she was an animorph. And there's been some explanations people have come up with of her being fused with some kind of darkness in some way, but I feel like none really gives much of a motive. I mean, most suggest that Des isn't really that conscious in this state, and that's kind of the whole thing Carol's plan revolves around, but that feels kinda dull. I'm not saying I'd go right on the streets and say this game had the worst story ever if it was the case. This is the guy who made Undertale, for God's sake. Don't you remember the Greek tragedy that is Azrael? I think that it would be better narratively for it to be more of a hostile takeover situation than a simple corruption. So what I'm suggesting is that the knight isn't this, kind of, but also is. Basically, I think the knight is some darkner, although one like the Titans, where it's an idea given form rather than an object. I mean, it does look suspiciously close to some of the depictions of the Titans when Rousey explains the roaring for the first time. Perhaps just like the Titans are the fear of the dark, the night could be the idea, the concept of the roaring taking shape. Although I will admit, would make it strange that they don't just open a bunch of fountains and cause it immediately, as there doesn't seem to be anything that stops them. But it doesn't really matter what concept they are, just that they are one, or at least something similar to the Titans. One that took a Lightner's soul to be able to traverse through the light world due to now possessing determination. In fact, this little teaser of some dialogue from Chapter 5 alludes to Shadow Crystals being made of determination, which would imply the knight has a lot, considering you get the one from it, alongside the Black Shard, by chipping its blade, which appears to be an extension of it. I also would like to say that I think this darkener most likely came from the Shelter's Dark World, not even necessarily from an evidence standpoint, although there are implications, but because of just how this place has been so dramatically built up narratively. But that means we have to address something. If the original version of the night came from this dark world, and it means it came from a dark world, from a fountain that is open and flowing, which means someone had to open it, which there's not even a what if it's just some naturally occurring dark world, which we just don't know is possible yet, considering it is isolated inside of a man-made, actually that might not be the right term for this, monster-made building. Someone had to have opened this fountain, but I'm not gonna pretend to know who. I mean, it could have been Chris, concerning the rumor that them and Caddy tried to summon a demon when they were kids. Maybe this was the outcome of that endeavor, but I don't know, man. The idea that the big plot twist to the game is just some random bit of backstory said in some random dialogue feels anticlimactic to me. I mean, it does technically count as foreshadowing, I guess, but if it were the case, it feels more like haphazardly throwing some earlier in the game to count. If it was this important, wouldn't there be more signs than like, what, 2 pieces of dialogue? That being said though, I'm not against the idea of Chris being the one to open the fountain. I think it'd make a lot of sense narratively and explain the heavy implications Chris feels guilty for something. That being said, I don't know how it could happen in a way that is satisfying narratively. But to be fair, the game isn't done yet. Not only do we not have all the pieces to the puzzle, we don't got the box. A slight minor clue at what might be the finished picture. Given how well the Asriel plot twist at the end of Undertale was able to work so well with what had already happened earlier in the game, it'll probably be great anyway. So now that we've talked about what the fairy is, let's talk about its implications. The knight possessing Dessa's soul and then using her determination to open the fountains would explain things like the baseball moon in chapter 2, bat-shaped sword, antlers, yeah, you know the deal by now. A giveaway for some interesting and engaging storylines with the concept that destroying the knight would kill an innocent. And not just any, but a childhood friend of Chris and Noelle's sister. Which would explain the whole sister getting cursed line in chapter 2, which seems to be foreshadowing of some sort since it's from Dragon Blazers, which is a reinterpretation of Lord of the Hammer, which is a reinterpretation of the Prophecy. Although the line says that the sister's still a part of your party after that, which I don't think would apply, but it doesn't need to be a direct one-for-one with how it's already 2 reinterpretations deep, and how Susie is seemingly gonna do what Gerson said and reinterpret the prophecy herself, just in reality. But then there's if the prophecy can be fully broken or just bent to make the words still true, even if in a way originally unintended. Or if it can be broken, if it already has, and on which routes it has. That's a whole can of worms I'm not talking about right now. Also, kinda related to this topic, can Noelle just become a full-time party member at some point, please? She's definitely coming back at some point because, well, I mean, I could point to her having unused dialogue for all the items you get after she's already left your party, but honestly, the fact she joins it at all, especially for how short of a time she does, is enough for me. Like, a lot of effort had to be put in to add an additional party member for this one very short sequence that doesn't really seem to be going anywhere yet. I mean, yeah, she does so you can trigger the weird round stuff, but that can't be the only reason. Plus, her ice magic is just cool. Pun unintentional, but aware of. I tried to think of another word to say that could fit naturally, but I just couldn't. Back to the actual topic at hand. It would allow us to also be the voice in the code without having to have it take place before, which just doesn't feel right to me. Especially considering the end of the message in chapter 4 kinda implies that it's happening like right now, like as we're reading it. There's also probably something to say about the sheer idea of part of the prophecy coming to life as a Darkner if that's true. If, you know, the thing I put forward of maybe the Roaring Knights is the concept of the Roaring. Which again has problems, but like, man, this game is only halfway finished. I don't have all the answers. But man, I don't know where that would go yet. Again, the game isn't done. I don't think we can know. Not yet, at least. There's also the question if having someone else's soul allows them to partially control your body, like an Undertale. But I'm just gonna chalk that one up to not enough information. Also, the lyric "and your future's lost its rights" from Raise Up Your Bat, a song we know for sure to be connected to this, it could also maybe hint at this and be a narrative parallel between Ness and Chris. Neat. But other than that, I can't really think of anything else to add to this, at least not at the moment. I think it's a really good narratively satisfying answer. Whether or not it's what's gonna happen is only gonna be answered when the game's fully out. But one thing I feel sure on is that with how good these chapters already are, whatever happens is truly gonna be something special. This game is clearly going to be something incredible. And wherever we go next, I'm sure will be very, very interesting. Oh, wait, this is the Deltarune very better. I gotta mention Gasser, else the dog man himself is gonna break down my door and hunt me down. Gasser made the shelter fountain. Yeah, he made the fountain. That's the thing he did. Yeah. Yeah.